Chair. We're ready to begin.
All right. Shall I just begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to this King Edward Bay LAC meeting. And so we can open the meeting now. And thank you all for attending. I thought it was a very good meeting we just had, the community meeting. I thought it was nice to see everybody so engaged. That's such an encouraging sight. Now, we need to approve the agenda. And you'll have access to that and I won't, but I've got a couple of comments about the agenda. One is, can I just note that I made a note of it when I did see it earlier, that my name doesn't end with an S. There's no S at the end of my name. And a small matter, but it doesn't make any difference. And for the minutes. But on the agenda was the issue of the regular item, which is about cost savings, which I'm going to persist in having until we deal with that. And the second,
Brian,
yes.
To save staff time, is there any chance we could do the cost savings one when we're discussing the budget, rather than at every meeting?
I think that would be fine to do. I'm absolutely happy to see that, provided we don't let it slip. Yeah.
Okay, because there are principles in our budget policies that do talk about some of the things you're talking about. So
it'd be great to hear those and to share them among us. Okay. And there's another additional agenda item which I'd like to add on, which is an item that arises from an initiative elsewhere, another LAC, about bringing together the chairs of LACs to discuss matters of mutual interest.
Okay, so item.
Make that 5.2, Steph.
Thank you. 5.2, Chair Summit Meeting. Okay, that's as amended then?
As amended.
With the one amendment.
Yeah. And can we approve the agenda? Do we have a motion? Thanks, Dawn. Seconder. Thanks. Oh, thanks. That'll do. And so that's passed. Can we go on to adoption of the minutes now? That's the minutes of July 13th, I believe. And do we have an approver for the minutes? Any dissent from? Do we have an approval?
Sure, I'll move approval of the minutes.
Thanks for moving. Oh, properly moved and seconded. Thanks very much, Don. And any objections to that? Any dissent? No. Well, we can do it by assent then. Thank you. Public comment, I think, is next, is it not?
We have no members of the public, but it's acknowledged that we just had 10 in the community information meeting. Lots of questions.
Okay, good. And then next item, I think, will be
we'll talk
implementation
about
metered rate.
Kristen Watson, Chief Financial Officer.
Over to you, Kristen.
Okay, thank you. Just to reiterate the discussion, staff were asked to provide residents of of King Edward Bay with actual hard data on what the implementation of a metered rate billing bylaw would look like for them. I think we've done that. I can do a little bit better job of that. Thanks, Dawn. I will add that extra fourth quarter in from the prior year and just use that as a proxy for the fourth quarter consumption, and we can have a look at that. Either way, we know that based on the consumption patterns in King Edward Bay, with that high number of seasonal residents, that we need to we aren't quite there with the rate structure, and we need to work with that in order to accommodate for that seasonal variation in consumption. So that'll be what's something that I will be working on over the next coming weeks. And we will, our budget meeting will be established for sometime in late January or early February. We want to give the new council the opportunity to meet, to do their strategic planning and be a little bit informed by some of the new directions that we might get from council. But other than that, the plan is to develop a new rate bylaw based on quarterly meter readings and have that in place in hopefully, if not all, most of the districts over the course of the next few months. So for this year, the impact for this year to King Edward Bay is that we will do the billing based on the same structure, but raise the rates in order to meet those previously approved revenue targets. And that would mean that the 960 goes to 1085 for connected properties and 675 for unconnected properties. So I would ask the committee, please, for a motion to support the adoption of that bylaw. The plan is to have that bylaw read by council on November 14th, approved by council on November 28th, and we will do the billing immediately after that bylaw has been adopted by council. So that's the plan. There's a couple of motions here that I would like the committee to pass. They are in the agenda. So one is with respect to that amended flat rate bylaw. And the other one is to indicate support for implementation of metered rate billing effective January to be implemented in the King Edward Bay Water District. So your comments and discussion on those two topics.
Does everybody have the agenda, or should Steph pop up the resolution on the screen or in the chat?
She doesn't need to read it out. I think we have it there. Kristen, the other aspect of the bylaw has to do with the penalty rates for exceeding the 220 gallons a day.
There's no penalties in the bylaw. The bylaw is structured so that metered rates kick in from the very first gallon. So it's not based on that 220 gallons per day.
There's a flat rate, but then aren't there additional charges if you exceed 220 gallons per day over a month?
Nope, the rate is it's incremental, but it starts at imperial gallon number 1. The whole point of this is to really change perception, is that water costs money, and it costs money from the very first gallon.
Yeah, I'm talking about now, not what you're proposing in terms
of.
Oh,
sorry. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, so this year for 2022, there'll be the flat rate of $1,085, and then for those people who exceed the 219.96 gallons per day, then the penalty rates that are previously appeared in the bylaw will continue.
Yeah, all of the metered rates are unchanged from that. There are so few people who ever go over that threshold that we collect very little, less than 10% of the revenue comes from the metered rates.
I'm also a little puzzled by your comment about the seasonality. In fact, the majority of King Edward Bay residents are full-time residents. I think what happens in the summer is we all have visitors. And as you know, I follow my own rate. I read my own meter and all the rest of that, just to try and manage consumption. And my goodness, if you have visitors, it's amazing how the water consumption does go up. But in terms of next year, I assume we will get a look at your draft of the, I don't know what you want to call it, measured from number 1 proposal. And we'll have a chance to comment on that before it goes to council, or when it's at council, or what would be the timeline there?
Yeah, in our we will have our budget meeting. I'm hoping for late January, but I'd rather have them completed before the end of January.
Right. Okay. But would the draft be presented to the LAC before that?
I could circulate it, but we would discuss it publicly at the meeting. We wouldn't have any discussion about it prior to a public meeting.
Okay. Thank you. That's reassuring. And Don had a question too, I think.
Actually, a couple of them, but going to the metered proposal, I was just wondering if you could sort of outline your philosophy then, if you're going to revamp it, because it does look like it wouldn't meet our targets. It's got two components, right? One is the flat rate, right, per quarter, and then there's the progressive increase based upon consumption.
Right.
So it seems to me those have both two different objectives, and they also have different consequences. The objectives are that the progressive rate per gallon is meant to cover that consumption management that you were talking about, to conserve, and it encourages
I would
that.
agree.
Whereas the flat rate is to make sure we collect enough money. And I think the dilemma that we face with all these pricing schemes is that to the extent that you encourage conservation, you're not going to be collecting as much money. You've even actually recognized that by withdrawing this, that the conservation just was so good, if I could say it that way, that we weren't making enough money. Now that's a rather kind of grim way to state it, but what I'm interested in is, where do you draw the line? At what point do you say we need to cover these contributions to the reserve fund, regardless of whether people conserve or not? Or we need to reward people for conserving and maybe take it out of less revenue. So I think there's sort of a philosophical decision you're going to have to be making, and I kind of wonder what your thoughts are as you approach this.
Yeah, my approach would be to stick with the split between the 75% collection from the flat rates, the 25% collection from metered rates, and then given the very detailed consumption data that I have and that I will collect at the end of December, using that, I will make some kind of assumption as to how people's behavior may change and factor in some kind of potential for reduction based on consumption being reduced, and determining rates using those data and drawing some averages out of that. But instead of, taking a meter reading at a point in time and extrapolating that across the whole year, I do have that reliable data that measures consumption in the actual periods that we're going to be matching to the billing. So I have better data. I think that I will take a very conservative approach and estimate that people's patterns will be that they will conserve, because the risk is then that I set them too low and we don't meet those revenue targets, and I don't want that to happen.
Right. In a way, we almost need an econometric analysis to find out what the elasticity of demand is, as they call it. That is the extent to which the price will drive down consumption or not. I think that's also at the heart of Virginia's letter too, which is that you have these different impacts and different consequences. It's almost a philosophical question. That is, do you go for equality where everybody pays the same thing and we have a Gini index, to get kind of technical, that is kind of low, or do we sort of put it in there to really go after consumption and say if you use over this amount you're really going to get hammered?
Yeah.
So I think that's why I would really agree with Michael's implicit suggestion here that we have a chance to discuss this.
Sure.
Because I think one of the things that's a little bit frustrating is if we get handed a formula, however well thought out it is, but without a look at how the local circumstances may change that.
Yeah. I mean,
I know
there's
it's gonna
winners
be
and
a-
losers in anytime you change the mix. Some people are going to be happy and some are not. And
So I think we need to be able to explain why, if they're unhappy, or what caused them to be unhappy.
yeah.
Yeah, and Kristen, didn't you, I asked you at the last meeting if consumption had actually gone down in Tunstall Bay as a result of the new rate structure, and I think it showed up in the minutes that it had not?
I can't answer that question. I didn't do any analysis on it. I don't have the measured. Tunsil Bay was only ever just kind of read intermittently, and that the data is just too unreliable for me to do any real analysis on what consumption patterns were before they brought it in. So yes, we did talk about that. And from what I saw, I wasn't able to draw any inferences from the very sporadic meter reading that they did there.
Okay, that was the problem there.
Yeah.
It's the problem. Economists recognize inelastic demands, as Don was talking to it. And there's famous ones, one of them, gasoline. You know, people will back gas their cars no matter how expensive it gets.
Yeah. So the more inelastic the demand is, the better off we are.
And the reality is, I think with the best of intentions, if you actually have to have a life, you use somewhere between 75 and 100 gallons a day anyway, just for cooking, cleaning, bathing, and all the rest of that.
Well, we have it. It's very clear. It's very apparent what people's patterns are. So it's good data. I'm glad that we've got it.
Right. And what we need to do, though, is attack those people who, I mean, there's all kinds of, it's Bourne Island, so there's all kinds of stories going around, but those people who rinse off their boats and their paddle boards using the municipal water and so on. And that's the real issue, is overconsumption. There's a level of consumption that we will all have to meet again for life. So I just urge you to think about it that way. And I think that would be the fairest way of dealing with it. But anyway, I look forward to your draft number 2.
Thank you. You know, I think, Michael, too, some people have needs to use water, and it doesn't matter what the price is. They may or may not change their behavior because it may or may not be an issue for them. And if you look at the data, there's a couple of properties there that are, you know, I would ask that question.
Yeah. By the way, I'm guessing that the account number is sequential by lots. So I know which is mine, and I now know which is my neighbor's. And
no, actually, they're not. They're in the order. They're issued out kind of in the order that applications. So they could be kind of all over the place. So yeah, they're not like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting exercise, and I like your goal of fairness and consumption. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, fairness and conservation, and we'll see how that.
Very good. Thank you for that. We better move on now. I would just say that actually I've only been able to count 4 people who are seasonal in them, who of the people that I know, excluding the people who are building a house currently, excluding all of those people, I can only think of 4 people in King Edward Bay and Arbutus Ridge who are seasonal in the way that you described. I'm interested in your figures, but you know, we'll find our way through all that, I'm sure.
Well, I guess it's just the inferences I made looking at the consumption patterns. I think, Michael, your point about summer visitors is probably more to the point than what I just suggested, that there were people who spent more time at their home in the summer than they did in the winter.
Okay.
That's where.
So, Mr. Chairman, would you like someone to move the motions?
I think we better had. We might as well move all those at the same time, shall we? Why not? Because my suspicion.
Do you want me to share the screen? I can share.
Go on, Don.
Yeah, could I, before we move on, the reason for the one of the motions, which is to use the old approach, but just increase the rates, is to meet our funding target for the reserve fund, right?
Yes.
And that's basically it. That's why we're looking at an increase, and it's the targets that you talked about in July at the general meeting, and I've got no principled concerns about that. But I guess I just am, since you gave us the budget snapshot of what the year-to-date expenses are, and there are a lot of unknowns because the transfers haven't been made and everything else. But I guess I just would like to know, are we on trajectory for making that target?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to provide you just with a year-to-date snapshot of where we are at with expenses at this point in the year. So I don't see anything that's raising any red flags for me that I need to make you aware of at this point. I believe that we'll end the year close to as anticipated with budget.
Okay, and I don't want to hold things up, but this may be the only time I could raise a question like this, seeing this. It looked to me like the contractual services was way out of budget. I was just wondering why.
Yeah. Yeah, I did check in with Garrett about that, and Patrick, you probably know more about it, but there was a large expenditure that happened, and in the end, it may actually be a capital expenditure because of the size and the duration of the improvement, but it had to do with installing some communication equipment in the new well. Patrick, do you know what that was about? It was Kerwood Lidle. The payment was made to Kerwood Lidle.
Yeah,
That
so
was
there
for-
there was some work that had to be done in terms of linking the operation of the current the previous King Edward Bay wells with the new Arbutus well and our SCADA. That would have been, and so that's something that our staff were working with the engineers and the contractor on commission. Essentially, the commissioning of the system is ongoing. And now we've run into this issue I explained earlier with the Arbutus well that we're looking into. So there may be a way to put some of this back on the contractor and developer.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why we're paying for that when it's to do with the contractor and Arbutus Ridge.
Well, I guess because it's not, I mean, it has to do with the contractor, but it also has to do with how we operate our own system with this new infrastructure. Not all of the details have been sorted out, so we're working on that.
Mm-hmm. So some of that cost is the result of the needs of Bluewater.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the formula that would be included in the transfer.
Okay.
And it sounds like some of it might be capital too.
Yep.
Yeah, we'd have to think about that. We have to really kind of make sure that we're not dipping into capital for things that are really running costs. But okay, welcome. Nice to see you, Bruce.
Thanks. Sorry I'm late.
Don't worry. I know you had things to do.
You
All
want me
right.
to
Well, we're
share
at the
the
stage
screen?
now of needing to
We haven't voted on the resolution.
We need to vote on the resolution, exactly. So
I'm gonna put it up because it's long and then the people can see it.
And Bruce just joined us.
Welcome, Bruce.
Thanks.
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Who wants to read it?
or shall I read it? Whereas a new metered rate bylaw has been proposed for the King Edward Bay local service area, and whereas staff have analysed the effect of the proposed rate on the property owners and budgeted annual revenue requirements for 2022, therefore be it resolved that King Edward Bay Water System Local Advisory Committee recommend that Council direct staff to draft a metered rate bylaw to be effective January 1st, 2023, and that staff communicate that the proposed rate structure changes to property owners. And be it further resolved that Council amend Bowen Island Municipality Bylaw number 543, 2021, King Edward Bay Annual Rates Bylaw, to increase base rate charges to $1,085 for connected properties and $675 for unconnected properties for the 2022 calendar year. So do I have a motion to approve those? We'll do them all at once, shall we? Thank you.
Yep.
Don, are you moving?
I'm moving, but I also just have a question too.
Let's do your question first.
All right. Well, it doesn't have to be, but does this? I mean, this one very clearly implements the old system for this current year, but I just wanted to make sure it doesn't necessarily implement the new metered rate for next year. Is that my
No, we have to draft a new bylaw, which will involve taking into account the new information that we have to inform that bylaw.
Right, or further discussion, hopefully, too. Okay, fine. So in other words, we're not putting in 2 years' worth. It's just this
Correct.
current year.
Yeah.
It's back to the drawing board for me for metered rates for January 1st.
You'll enjoy that, Kristen. I know that.
I probably will, Brian.
Thank you for the flexibility.
All right. Can someone move this? Has someone have got a proposal?
You know, it might make more sense if the last clause was switched with the clause above it, because the first bit says, whereas staff has analyzed the effect of the proposed rates. So it would be better
Yes.
to, it would,
I like that.
so you don't need further resolved
Got it.
in the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Mhm.
It's the voice of experience. Thank you very much for that. And now, are we content to for someone to move this? Move that. Thank you, Dawn. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Have we any dissenters from this, from accepting this? Seeing none, we can accept it by assent. Thank you very much.
Good.
Missing an
Okay,
E in the carried there, Steph.
Carried.
carried, yeah.
Carried.
Aaron, rates.
I can't say accepting by assent, can I? I have to say carried. I do
Pretty
apologize.
big. It's a pretty big one to do by consent. We could say carried unanimously.
It was by assent, not consent, but there we are. Never mind. All right. So the next item is
The next item is,
Patrick. I wonder if you could give your Patrick. I think. Wonder if you could go through your presentation again. No, I didn't.
Alison
You
gave
have
me
it
notes on
memorized, Brian.
recommendation.
It's an excellent presentation, Patrick. Really well done on that. But okay.
So we want to do the recommendation that's in the agenda to support.
There is currently a recommendation, which is, shall I read that?
But
Well,
Alison,
it needs to be a little more specific, Steph.
I know, and I made notes and I can't find them right now. Sorry, let me just.
Okay, so what you're supporting is the PowerPoint presentation, the budget or the proposal as set out in your PowerPoint presentation, Patrick?
No, can I, it's the plan, not the PowerPoint presentation. If that's one of the
But-
same things in your mind, then that's what we're doing.
But
Okay.
there's no reference to saying what the newly proposed plan is.
Yeah.
You've got to link it to something.
Improvements.
That's the one.
Yeah, it seems to me that what we could most appropriately address is the phase 1 part of that presentation, because that's an actual plan, and it's one which actually envisions relieving our wells of the burden of supplying so much of Bluewater. So,
The
I
only,
mean,
the only anxiety I have about that is that I'm really concerned about just providing more water without doing the infrastructure stuff. So,
fair enough. Yeah.
you know, so I would be keen to see a support of the whole plan to make sure we get the whole of it done.
Okay.
Well, that's the whole package
Yes.
was in the PowerPoint presentation, the whole plan.
Yeah.
Why don't you say the support the full Bluewater Park
Or
replacement?
4 phases.
Yeah,
Support the 4 phases.
of the,
All 4 phases? Sorry.
or just the full plan? The full Bluewater replacement and improvement project?
Well, another way say advisory committees support the implementation of the whole of Bluewater Park water system.
Is it called, is that what it's called, Patrick? Isn't Bowen Bay? Is it called Bluewater Park? Or is it West
Bluewater
Side?
Park Water System Replacement Project.
That's what we landed on. I was calling it an improvement project, but we had to add replacement and
But it's
improvement.
Bluewater Park, it's not West Side,
No, it's Bluewater.
It's been referred to as Bluewater.
with a little help from Bowen Bay, okay.
Thank you
For
for
the
that.
implementation of the,
The whole of Bluewater Park.
The whole Bluewater Park system replacement and information project
Yeah,
or improvement project
that will do.
as proposed or presented.
It's been proposed, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it was presented at the November meeting, so that's tying it into the plan that was presented tonight.
Yeah.
okay,
All right, can we have a proposer,
mover,
a mover? I see no hands.
nobody's into this anymore.
Oh, yeah.
That
And
Donald-
a seconder. So Michael and Don have proposed
Okay.
and seconded.
All in favor?
All in favor,
Okay.
all against.
Very
Seeing none.
unanimously.
All right. We can accept that as having been passed. Thank you. And then finally, it's not quite finally. It's recommendations that I put together as a result of the discussions that have been going on between us out of meeting. So can I just offer a little bit of context to this before we talk more about it? I mean, obviously we're keen to support the development in Bluewater, particularly because everyone needs water and we're trying to be helpful as much as we can. But there is a concern that we have long had about the wells in King Edward Bay being put at risk. And to my reckoning, we've had 10 years of sustained risk for our wells, and even in a reasonably good summer, quite not so hot, like this one we've just had, our wells were in trouble. And without the Arbutus Ridge one that's newly come online, we would have been in a great deal of trouble. And I've been anxious about the deleterious effect that may have over a period of time, as many of us have, when I've talked to you, as you've been walking the streets and we've chatted about it. Everybody's concerned about this. And as a consequence, we thought we would just try and get very specific, because there's up until now very little been actually done about action to preserve the wells and our infrastructure. And that's what this is about, really. That's what these things are about. And you heard Allard earlier raise some of these matters explicitly, which is very helpful to get that from an additional party. So the first recommendation that I thought we'd consider is that the King Edward Bay Water System Local Advisory Committee recommend that the priority of Bowen Island Municipality be the preservation of natural resources and infrastructure of the King Edward Bay local service area. Now, obviously in doing this, I'm not suggesting that it's number one priority for the whole municipality. What I'm saying is in respect of King Edward Bay and the provision of water. And this differs from what has historically been the priority, which has been simply the provision of water on a relatively short, medium-term basis. I'm thinking in this to explicitly support the municipality in preserving the natural resources and infrastructure in the very long term. And that's why that's there. It's not just about supplying water, it's about preserving our resources in the long term. And I'm delighted actually that Patrick, you've on a number of occasions kind of alluded to this, and in your more recent presentation, you've put it front and center. I'm very pleased to see that indeed. So any thoughts? People have stopped thinking at about 10 to 8.
Oh, my reaction is it's a no-brainer. Of course, that's what we should be doing. The municipality and all the residents.
Yeah. Bruce, you were about to say something?
Yeah, with the way you frame that shifts the responsibility of how we manage our water system from sending water out to a variety of parties to focusing all our attention on our wells and aquifer, regardless of who needs demand on it. And that's where we're going to ask the municipality to operate our wells in that concept, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yes, it
Is
is.
that different than how they were mandated before the operator system? Like I'm trying, I like what you're saying. I agree with it. I just wanted to know how that. I didn't have a chance to read it before I came online.
So
How does that change the operation perspective of the municipality with that wording? I'm curious. Or does it?
I think, sorry, someone, did I interrupt someone there?
No, I'm just sharing the screen.
Okay. Well, it changes it only in as much as what the explicit priority could be. And I think it's not unconnected to what we say later, a subsequent recommendation. But at the same time, it stands on its own. It's a kind of philosophical statement of where we need to be going in this. And I know that Patrick is stuck with the challenge of having to operationalize these matters and a certain obligation to provide water where it is needed, where to people who are paying for water. I can get all that. But that at this time shouldn't be our priority. Our wells have had 10 years of being really stressed, and particularly during the summer. And we have to find a way of anticipating that and acting in a preemptive and responsible way. And it seemed to me that without a clear statement about what the priorities are, about how we're going to manage our water over here on the west side, it's more difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this does not actually oblige the municipality to do anything. This is our recommendation to the municipality.
It doesn't oblige, but it puts council in a position where they need to receive and consider. And
yes, yeah.
So it's not nothing. You in your context, you mentioned like contrasting. So just this where it says the priority of Bowen Island municipality.
I think you need words in there that says in the operation and administration of the King Edward Bay local service area.
I agree.
King Edward Bay water system.
That's very helpful. Yes, let's do that.
So you said something about the provision of water. Is that like?
Yeah, I know you added that. I would take it out because the municipality is under in my way of thinking, they're under an obligation to provide water anyway.
Right.
Really what we're saying is don't provide the water at the cost of, well, running the wells dry.
Yeah, so if you insert it after municipality, something along the lines of recommend that the priority of Bowen Island municipality in the operation, not be in the operation of the King Edward Bay water system, be the preservation of natural resource. Is it resources or natural resource?
Resources.
Either will do. They'll know what we mean.
Yeah. Okay.
And infrastructure.
Yeah. And you do want to say natural resources rather than water resources.
Yeah,
do you want to give examples?
I think the more we say now, the more complicated it'll be. I think it stands as it is.
Are you okay with the words I suggest to be inserted after municipality there, Brian?
Yes, and it's helpful because it suggests that we're not trying to determine the major priorities of the whole municipality in this. It's just in respect
back
of
in, Steph.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian, I cringed a little bit when I saw the wording because it did sound like that was going to be the number one. But
Yeah,
so I like this. I think this is right. I think too, it's very useful because it provides a guiding principle for making decisions. I mean, I guess there could come a point where a decision might be, gee, do we keep the wells running or do we bring in water by truck? And this, I think, provides a little bit of guidance as to how the decision ought to be made.
Yeah, I am in agreement with it.
Sorry, I've got to write notes as well. Okay,
Okay, well, can we have a proposer and a seconder, please? We don't need to read it again. We've seen it there. So Bruce, thank you.
Yep.
And is there a seconder? Can't see everybody on my screen at the moment. And
Don?
again, thank you.
Mhm.
All in favor? Anyone against? Can't see everybody on the screen. You'll have to shout out.
No one's against.
No one shouting out. Good. All right. Well, then we're carried. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next. The second recommendation is that the King Edward Bay Water System LAC recommend the reduction of water transferred from King Edward Bay Water System to the Bluewater Park Water System during the month of June, July, August, and September, in order to anticipate potential harm to King Edward Bay infrastructure, rather than respond to shortages when they occur, and review the necessity of this when the plan, by which I'm referring to the Bluewater.
then you need to put BWP plan.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Is fully implemented. In other words, that obviously this is not in perpetuity. We're looking to see, just make sure that we are not continuing to harm our wells year after year during the summer months. But once we resolve the matters, as we think we are, and Patrick has assured us that we are going to resolve the matters, and our wells won't be under that kind of pressure, then we can revisit this.
Can I make a wordsmithing comment? I'm not comfortable with anticipate potential harm. Why not be frank and straightforward and say, in order to avoid harm to King Edward Bay? That's really what we're trying to do here.
But it was a process of it.
Harmed.
I see.
Or what about prevent?
Okay, prevent harm would be fine too, but that's really what we're trying to do here. It's not potential. We know it's real.
Yeah. And that was my intent also writing this. So I just got the word wrong.
So do you want prevent potential harm or
No,
just prevent harm?
Prevent harm.
Prevent harm is good.
Is it feasible on the recommended reduction? Because that's fairly ambiguous.
Yeah.
Is there a way that, Patrick, is there a calculation you can maybe produce, say that, I don't know, each home that the system can provide, if we're in real restrictions, that maybe it's 80 gallons per house per day, whatever that number is, we can regulate the water to that number, and then their other wells do their best, and then they go into whatever stage of restriction they need to deal with that reduction. Because if you can maybe reduce it by 10%, but we're still running our wells full tilt and we're still running the system into a danger zone. So is there a way that you could provide a guidance on what that number could be reduced to during those months?
Well, what I was going to suggest, if I understand what you're recommending is rather than recommending reduction of water transferred, I mean, how do you do that, right? You can recommend, proactively implementing water restrictions or more aggressive demand management. Like that's something you can do. You can't just modulate, like, you can't just reduce the amount of water transferred. I don't see how that works. Like, it would be a more useful recommendation to me, and I think it's what you're getting at, that you want to see that this water restrictions being more proactive.
Yeah, you're right, Patrick, but I did feel a bit anxious about saying that because I don't want to tell you how to do your job. You know, you have to regulate this, and whatever options there are, you have to administer. So I was trying to be a little bit ambiguous to give you that discretion.
Okay.
But I'm happy to go with a more specific direction, or if you can turn this into one.
How about something like take measures such as implementing more water use restrictions, or in order to reduce the amount of water transferred?
Or just maybe if you wanted to say implement more aggressive demand management measures to reduce the
How effective is that? Like, for instance, this year, were you able to identify high demand? Did Bluewater actually reduce their numbers and volume over with their stage 4 water restriction, or did they pretty much use the same amount throughout the summer?
Well, it's also enforcement, I think.
yeah, it didn't it wasn't obvious, the reduction, you know.
So is it stricter enforcement that's needed?
Well, that's what the next recommendation tries to attend to. We became aware in King Edward Bay that those regulations in Bluewater weren't being particularly well attended to, and we had examples of it that made it generated a bit of irritation in the community.
I mean,
Well,
could you go ahead?
No, I was just going to say, has everybody just read what Steph's typed?
Yeah, I did, and I'm liking the direction it's going, because I think it respects the muni staff's prerogatives to decide on how to implement policy, but it suggests a particular direction, and it also stipulates what the objective is, which is to prevent harm. Oh, I think we still have the potential harm there, which probably should be taken out.
It's just take out the word potential between prevent and harm, Steph. Yeah.
Great.
So do you need the rather than responding to shortages when they occur clause?
Yeah.
Somewhere else.
Yes or no?
Well, it'd be helpful to make that does make it clear what we intend to do here. That we're not waiting for problems. We're going to anticipate those problems and react in a preemptive way.
But I guess from an operations perspective, that tap is open and the water just flows as the taps are turned on the other side.
Yeah, that's the concern I have. There's no way to enforce or get Bluewater to reduce. So our wells are going to be running full tilt. And at the moment, it sounds like there's no way that we can control that other than, and there's only so much labor the Bowen Island municipality have to go around and enforcing why you running your irrigation taps at full tilt. There's no physical way, like a flow restrictor that says, you know, the most that you could flow to the Bluewater system is 30 gallons a minute or 10 gallons a minute. And that gives them over 24 hours that extrapolated number, which is divided among their households. And you have a big, like a fire sign at the entrance into it that their water tank is at yellow, blue, green, red, and everybody has to take I don't know.
I don't know how you
seems
do
like
that. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're trying to get at, but I don't see how that's practical.
Right. Yeah, until we tell Bluewater or King Edward Bay's wells are shut down, and we got to replace the pump, and there's a delay, and or our recovery rate of our well has gone so low. How do we then we're all on stage 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we want to prevent. So,
Well, the
Yeah, I don't
way they do it, the way they do it
What about the-
elsewhere. Sorry, Bruce, go on.
oh, no, I was just sort of giving idea, just because I'm an operations water guy, I'm thinking of ways that you could maybe do that. But obviously, Patrick, you know the infrastructure and access to that water line, and other complexities. But I don't know, there's got to be some way that, you look at Sunshine Coast and what they ran into, running trucked water into their hospitals because they didn't have enough reservoir. I like the idea of what's being said, but how it's practical for municipality to actually engage this, I'm not sure.
Well, there's a couple of ways briefly. I mean, there are introducing the water restrictions. We know that we could encourage people to enforce them more effectively, but there are other things to be done too. I mean, there could be time limits during the day, so the water will be on only for some times during the day, not
Well, that's what's in the.
not
in the
24
various
hours.
changes.
Say
It's
that again,
Time
please.
limits and what you can and can't do. So
Yeah, so I think we're not going to define here everything that might be done, but we open the door for things that could be considered.
Understood.
So are we leaving the words rather than responding to shortages in the thing?
I don't know if we need that.
Yeah, because I mean, from a practical perspective, it's the tap's just on.
Yeah.
It's the flow
It does say
valve.
it does say to prevent harm, which I suppose is the same thing, isn't it?
Could I just ask, I'll tell you, one of the concerns that leads me to want this is what happened with our water tank in the middle of summer when we got below the FUS recommendations for capacity for fire flow. I think that's the kind of immediate tangible risk that we're seeing from the current situation, because I mean, it kind of frightens me that we didn't have enough water to fight a fire.
And that's an impact to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It
Alison,
seems to me that's the
you made the comment about not turning the water off. When I was a child in Australia, the city I lived in had very serious water problems until they built a big new pipeline. And this is a city, not just a municipality. They simply turned the water off from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Oh,
Yeah, I take it, is that sacrilegious to?
from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or the other way around?
No, they turned it off during the day. Yeah.
Oh,
It's not uncommon. They do it in Greece a lot.
Yeah, I remember my mother would get up early and fill the bathtub with water so that she could have her tea. And so is there some kind of mandate in the municipal charter that water be provided by? I mean, I'm not suggesting anything be turned off, although you need to know that quite a few King Edward Bay residents do come up to me, and I think Brian has heard this as well, and say, why can't we just turn off the water to Bluewater? And I try to explain why that's inhumane.
Yeah, you don't want to do that, do you?
But there is that, there is that sort of.
You have said more aggressive demand management measures, and you provide an example.
Yeah, I think that's all we can do at the moment.
That would be like extremely aggressive, turning off the water.
Yeah.
But
you know what? One of the things, Patrick, that Kristen's work has given me a lot of hope for is that there's an analysis of demand. I mean, we've always had good analysis of production, but now we have really good analysis of demand and usage. And so we have the statistics that will help us identify. Anyway.
And the proposed rates will, are also they're demand management driven.
Yep. Oh, there's lots of things really are
part of this as well.
Other than turning the water off.
So if we pass this one, I think we can dispense with the last one.
Yeah, I was going to make that point. So I will then move this recommendation.
Do we need to read it, or does everyone have it?
We have it on the screens.
All right, we have everyone content with it, and we've got a second or two. Thanks, Bruce. So all those in favor?
Everyone.
No. And everyone, and there being no dissenters, we can think of that as carried. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Now, information items.
No, you had the new 5.2, your chairs meeting, Brian?
Ah, correct. Chairs meeting. I just wanted to address this, just make sure that there is an initiative from elsewhere on the island to bring together the chairs of all the LACs to share information about the common issues. That I think it's a very good idea, and I think we should attend. We should go to that. I should go to that, and see what happens. But I didn't want to do it without bringing it to this meeting first, so you knew what was going on. These things shouldn't be done in secret, should they?
What's happening?
What's happening is that there's an initiative from elsewhere on the island that for the chairs of all the LACs to get together to share information about what's happening in their areas, but also to assemble what is common ground and common issues and how we're dealing with them. I think it's a very good idea myself. I think that
It's actually in the advisory committee bylaw.
what's it say?
Very last clause under responsibilities and duties to the committee. The chairs and vice chairs of the water system shall meet at least once a year. Meetings shall be at the call of the municipality or of 3 of the chairs.
Okay, there you go. I never knew that.
So
Is that have the like all of the regulations about having a recording, a minute taker, and staff and council?
oh yeah, it would have to be.
So this is part. Okay.
Well, I'm assuming it's the very last clause of 15 sub C for Charlie in bylaw 258 2009. So maybe somebody went and read it after I did the little housekeeping bylaw and said none of the others had changed.
Okay, well,
Yeah, that was from a history perspective. We had a Water Services Management Commission, which, because you guys all came along after all of this was done in 2010 or 12, we that commission was made up of the chairs and vice chairs of all the LACs, and they met on a fairly regular basis, and it was there to share all the common issues during the transition period. And then came 2008, nobody was coming to the meetings, and so we never had quorum, so that got disbanded. And this clause was put in the new bylaw as sort of covering that off. I mean, Kristen's talking about her new water metered rates, for example, would be a good example of, having everybody together.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we don't really have to raise it then. It has been, if we just make a comment in the minutes about that particular motion.
If somebody's trying to organize one, then the process is there for them to do it.
That's right. It's addressed by bylaw 259.
No, it's 258.
258. Can't read my own writing. All right, thank you very much for that. And finally, any other final matters?
Yeah, can I just make the comment in case any of our friends and neighbors in Bluewater are watching, that really the concern is to make sure that all 3 West Side communities have adequate water.
Absolutely.
And that's really what's motivating our approach to things.
Very good. Thank you for stating that really clearly. That's absolutely, it sometimes gets lost that, but that is exactly what's in my mind. Any other comments or things that people would like to say?
Well, I'll just point out information item 6.3 that your reserve fund is established.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Done. Thank you.
One of the first things Kristen did after assuming her new job.
Yeah.
Yes, well done. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're very pleased that it got done. Now we have to fill it, right? Get it up to 90%. Isn't that the percentage we need, Patrick?
Yes, which is insanely about $5.7 million. All right, well, next meeting to be determined. I think we'll have to, unless we.
That'll be the budget meetings that Kristen was discussing earlier. Late
Okay.
January, early February.
Thank you for that. Well, then we're then at that wonderful moment when I think we adjourn.
Motion to
Thank
adjourn.
you.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody.
Seconded. Gosh.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys, and appreciate particularly everyone from the